Bobby Corrigan, welcome to Talking Pest Management.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you for having your time. Bobby, first question. How did you experience COVID-19 and what do you think are the impacts on rodents?
Well, I think first, as an experience, we're all, of course, pretty much in shock that, here in New York City, for example, on March 17th, we were told everybody to go home. And I work in a big office complex in Lower Manhattan, right by the World Trade Center. And it was like a ghost town within a couple of days. So that was the first thing, is a shutdown will really wake you up in a big city, of course, when it's hustle and bustle and all of a sudden there's nobody on the street. So, as a human, of course, this has really gotten our attention and this has really changed us. And it'll be interesting to see how we come out the back end of it. That's going to be what's critical. How many things did we discover already, including here we have a Zoom meeting, for example, that how many do we really need to get on an airplane and travel and stay in hotels and so forth? So I think we're going to learn a lot of things as to this COVID-19. So, the pests are also, I think, teaching us some lessons. And, I think we're observing, in my area of expertise, we're observing, of course, rats that woke up and there was no food.
Yep.
They came out and what had been food for decades and maybe hundreds of their generations has gone away.
Yeah.
So now everyone is asking, I'm getting a lot of interview requests from around the world as to why are the rats acting like they're acting. And, I could say in one sentence, well, deprive yourself of food for 3 days and see how you feel, see how you act, see how you treat your neighbors. It will be different.
100%. I think a lot of pest control, a lot of what you preach and teach every day is around common sense pest control. So basically thinking about how rodents, why do rodents react a certain way? Just looking at how would we humans, who are also just highly developed animals in the end, would react to it.
Yes.
I'm going to read a quick sentence here, and I'm going to ask you for your comment. The USA Today commented that the Center for Disease Control and Prevention is warning that rodent populations which rely on a banquet of scraps and waste in restaurants and dumpsters are spiking in certain areas. You, with your focus on NYC, what would be your comment on that?
I agree 100%, and I do collaborate with the CDC on rodent issues and tracking diseases and so forth. So, again, the rats, for the most part, as an urban species, the Noe rat and the roof rat, they've become pretty dependent on Homo sapiens, people. And so what's happening is the animals themselves are not spiking. It's the sightings of the animals that are certainly spiking.
Yeah.
And, again, when you have a hungry animal that is used to finding its food at night, but all of a sudden, they go out at night and nothing is there, they're going to try the day and see, well, maybe there's something about our cycle that reversed. And you can easily reverse the cycle of pests, especially rats, from day to night, depending on when you have the food ready.
Like
so I agree.
Here over the past century.
Exactly. Totally right. And so the spiking is all of a sudden people are seeing some rodents during the day, which is unusual. Some of them are hungry, so they look disoriented. That scares people. They think they're maybe sick and aggressive, and maybe they have rabies, which they do not carry. And maybe they have COVID, they wonder. So I agree with the statement that the CDC issued. Unfortunately, a little bit, the press is running with certain words to get everyone's attention, like aggressive rats, zombie rats, plague-ridden rats. They want everybody to read that article. And so they use headlines that are a little bit too sensation, so.
Agreed. So what do you think? Is it actually, a lot of people also contact me and we discuss in the pest world, we discuss whether there's actually just more rat sightings or whether there's actually an increase within the population, especially in areas like New York City.
Well, the interesting thing here is, even though I just mentioned there's more rat sightings, my experience as a rodentologist, and I'm in contact around the world, including here we have this meeting between you and I in Germany and US, but I'm in contact with a lot of pest control agencies. I was just in New Zealand a couple of months ago. I think the rat populations in general, as a number, are up. They're up. And business is showing they are up. Requests for services for rats all around the world, and mice, by the way, also, we can't exclude them, is up. Mm-hmm. We don't have any strong empirical data, where we could actually put a before and after. It's a country by country, city by city, but in general, we do know they're up. The interesting thing is, why are they up? That's the $60,000 question, as we say, is why are they up? It's almost like, why did bedbugs return?
Yeah.
with such a vengeance and at such speed? We don't have the answer for that yet either.
True. Yeah, I agree. It would be really helpful to get empirical data. This is also when we are talking about the future of pest management in the next couple of minutes. We're going to discuss also digital helpers, and I hope that empirical data, just data, the FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, collect data, and that's the new gold everybody teaches us. I think that in pest management, the new gold will be collected too, but we're going to speak about that later on. I would like to get more into detail again when it comes to all the headlines of the big newspapers and your comment on that people fear that rats might also carry COVID.
Yes. Everything I've read from the epidemiologists that study which animals are susceptible to COVID-19 says the commensal rats and mice are not. I mean, that's certainly good news.
Yes.
But what is important is, and I did a study with Columbia University School of Public Health here in the US, and we have a very famous virologist, Ian Lipkin, and they have published papers showing our rats in New York City, for example, are carrying a host of novel viruses. And including, they do carry, by the way, the coronaviruses as a group is a giant group. The common cold belongs in the coronaviruses. Yeah. So of course, they're carrying coronaviruses, but not this novel coronavirus, which has mutated into COVID-19, not too distant related from SARS, if we remember the SARS threat. So the good news is, and I was one of the ones that asked the question very early on at CDC, is, people are shedding COVID-19 into the sewers, through fecal matter, that you would do that by the billions if you're a carrier. We have rats in our sewers in New York and many of our US cities. And so could they be mechanical transmitters? We're all washing our hands for obvious reasons. Yeah. We're told to scrub beneath the fingernails, so forth and so on, to get rid of viruses that could give you the flu or the cold. Well, what about that connection? And in meetings with CDC, they said, well, it's possible, but the risk is probably very low for rats to mechanically carry it from the sewers to surfaces where we would be subject. So that's at least good news.
100%. And I know at least that in Europe, our Association of European Pest Managers, SEPA, is keeping a close eye on this and also supporting university professors and virologists that are looking into that matter. I think for a good reason, us pest controllers should really play a vital part in exploring whether that could be a danger to humanity. Anyways, my next question would be oriented on the business side of and perception of pest management. Do you think that pest management companies are only affected that have dealt with bars, restaurants, and such, and hotels, of course, or also the ones that have been focused on commercial properties and food and pharma businesses?
At first, I think the pest management industry was, in a big shock and a big worry. But of course, pest management here has been, labeled as essential services.
Yes, I know.
And that makes the difference of, quote, you're allowed to continue as usual, as best as usual. Of course, many pest management companies lost the services of some of the restaurants, but most of the commercial facilities, the restaurants, hotels, shopping malls and so forth, they realize even though we're going to be in a shutdown, if we do not have our essential pest control monitoring and services inspections, all heck will break loose when we open up again
100%.
for pests everywhere. So I think the pest control industry is doing okay. There has been impact, but I think most that had commercial accounts are still servicing those accounts, but in a different way during a shutdown.
So you think less service, more reactive as proactive? What could be the approach?
It's a great question. I think in some ways there's more time for the better companies to be proactive, and also maybe to take a pause and to think about maybe now is the time to start using remote sensors, for example, putting in better data management systems. They have a window, I think, to do that, because sometimes, everybody says, I will do that soon, or I will do that in the future. And they're so busy just getting the service done, it's hard to find a window. So I'm hoping, I'm an optimist along these lines, I'm hoping the better companies realize you have to get on board eventually with remote sensors and data management and dashboards, and that is the future. Why not start now since you have a window?
Good argument. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And also, I am an optimist, so let's hope people are going to take the chance and hopefully use that window for a better and for a change. It could definitely, be an important or play an important and vital role in the future of our industry, I'm sure. I would also like to ask you about something that I think we have been speaking about, we as the industry, a lot about, which is IPM, Integrated Pest Management. You've probably talked about this for ages and every other day, but could you again point out your points on why IPM plays such a vital role in pest management, and also your point on whether it is performed at a degree that it deserves per today?
Sure. You're totally right. I mean, I've been involved with IPM going way back into my early career. I ran a pest control route myself for 3 years, saving money for college. But I have to tell you, back then, if I did not spray somebody's baseboards with a sprayer, they felt I was cheating them. And there's some people that still think that way today. So, but I would always remind myself, I was a student, studying some entomology in the background. I'd say, why am I spraying baseboards when the smart thing would be to seal up this building or this house or whatever it might be? And so integrated pest management, the foundation is, of course, it's let's keep things clean with sanitation. Let's keep things built up correctly. And then let's monitor, and as needed, then we institute a control. And I will say, and I think it's important when someone asks me about IPM, the word monitoring gets lost. Many times people don't realize if you are not monitoring a pest population you've been hired to manage within IPM, you are not performing IPM. You're leaving out a critical step. And so it's a situation where I try to say, what is your monitoring program? Because sometimes companies will say, we are plugging up holes, we are stuffing the holes, we are, trying to clean up. And I said, that's great.
That's your monitoring. I got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Where's your monitoring? And often that's where the silence, I get a silent answer. So I'm a firm believer, Danielle, in IPM because it is sustainable. And it really is a service that will carry itself long into the future, when we perform it.
Yeah. In the end, IPM also, as you described, is a pyramid with obviously the management of the building, garbage being here, monitoring, physical and the chemical control, etc. But currently, do you agree that the pyramid basically looks like that at the moment? That's somehow standing on its own peak? I
do, unfortunately, think as an industry, if we take the whole, I don't think we get a great grade for IPM as a whole. We talk about it, we brag about it, but in some cases it's, and in some cases it's customer driven. Again, there'll be some people like, where is the spray? Where is the black boxes with the poison baits? Don't give me a lecture on cleaning up or plugging holes. Your job is to get rid of these pests and do it. And it's a rock and a hard place, as the saying goes, for our industry. It is.
Yeah, 100% agreed. You said we get an F for how we treat our own nest as we humans. Maybe you can explain what you meant with that when we talked about garbage, especially in NYC and other big areas like that.
Yes, I think in general, if you look around, and again, there's exceptions to everything, and there's some cities in the world that get an A for the way they maintain their nest in their cities. And as I do surveys around the world, I see big differences in cities. In the US, to some degree, where we have high density cities with maybe stretched budgets for these city governments, it's a conundrum. It's difficult. And it's easy to say we need to do a better job. Yeah. But there are so many factors that play into this, including even sometimes I talk about IPM for the city, and they'll say the union will not agree to that. Of all things, you don't see the word union in IPM, right? The union management or the union employment or the benefits, and those things do not show up. I tried to get New York City, for example, to change litter baskets from one style to another that would deny rats, which could easily be done. But they said, no, our workers do not like the basket you advise, and we're not switching. So we continue to feed rats through our litter baskets.
I think New York City is probably the biggest playground on IPM, garbage management, and all of that, right?
It's got to be one of the tops. It's got to be. So somebody should do a study on that question.
So speaking about monitoring again, I know that there is, in my opinion, many people that have broad knowledge on chemicals, on pesticides, on rodenticides, on insecticides, and there is all sorts of innovations and new products, highly interesting new products coming out every year. But monitoring, you're right, it's actually underappreciated maybe to a certain degree. So how could one monitor, except from the obvious that one visits the site and does a thorough inspection?
Well, there's certainly nothing wrong with I'll use the term, the old-fashioned way of monitoring. Absolutely. If you wanted to do that, you could. But new technology, as you're alluding to, is really showing us that monitoring is going to have its day in a big way. And so now there's remote sensors, as we all are familiar with, and even the remote sensing technology, which has actually been out to some degree. It was born, years ago, but it's finally beginning to catch on.
It is.
Right. And so to me, as a consultant in the food industry, in the warehousing industry, and for big airports and so forth, I insist my customers employ monitoring using technology and database. They have to have good database management, and where they have powerful database where they can connect the remote sensors to the database management, because I think it is our obligation, if we agree to take on, say, a big project for an airport or a shopping mall or whatever have you, it's our obligation not to just treat for pests, but to profile the population of pests in that client's facility, so we can prove, quite honestly, if it's a court of law, how are we doing? Have you reduced the pest population by 30%, 62%? Yeah. Have you not reduced the pest population? And if not, why not? The only way we can do those and answer those questions is through monitoring. And technology now is enabling us to do that. Now, the old-fashioned way would take, you could do it, but it would be a lot of labor. If you had to get up in ceilings, I'll use that one as an easy example. Easy. If there's rats in a ceiling and there's 500 rats in a big shopping mall, that's going to be a lot of labor up and down ladders if you did it the old-fashioned way. So technology is going to enable us to do it just by looking at our iPhones or our smartphones.
Exactly. I don't know if you've seen the interview, but I interviewed Håkan Kjellberg, who is the technical manager of Anticimex, one of, I think, the world's third largest pest control company. And Håkan said they have their own smart, they call it smart system with digital sensors and technologies and traps. And Håkan said that we are going from knowing, or from guessing to knowing, which he thought was the biggest argument for going towards digital solutions as a helping hand. And this is also, I would like your comment on Håkan's quote there. And also I would like your opinion on whether a lot of technicians or, mid-management people in our industry fear that digital sensors are going to maybe not only change their work, their daily work as a technical person, as a pest manager, but also take away their jobs, make it redundant to a certain degree, which I have a lot of counter arguments, of course, for, because I think it's definitely going to change, but it's not going to take away their jobs. But I would like your comment on this rather long questions on the quote of Håkan from guessing to knowing, and on the perspective of pest management.
Well, I agree 100% with Hawkins, comment. It's beautifully stated, to be honest with you. It's very succinct, from guessing to knowing. That's it. We use the word in our industry that we always a little bit hide behind, to be honest.
Yeah.
We estimate, we've estimated your population to be low, medium, or high. Yeah. And again, where does that leave a customer? As well, is it low? What do you mean medium? It's a medium pest infestation. So, I think using words like estimates, and also words like we're controlling your population, that gives us too much wiggle room. Well, what does control mean? Exactly. If you killed 3 German cockroaches, did you control them? Well, maybe, maybe not, depending on the size of the population. So one thing leads to another as to that whole business of guessing and knowing. Yeah. And if we shift correctly, and it's going so fast, as you know, if we shift correctly and embrace all this technology and the power of it, we are going to know. And then it's going to be our job to make sure we transfer that accurately by being able to read databases to the client. And that brings in the technician. And there is concern. I hear many technicians, they express that same thing as, well, maybe I won't have a job in 2 years. And, I said, remote technology does not threaten your job at all, in my opinion. No one's going to be replacing the technician, because you must have the human element here and the human interpretation. Mm-hmm. Remote sensors can't interpret for us. True. They only can state the situation. They only can give us, how many mice were in the school kitchen, how many rats were in the ceiling. But it's our job as pest professionals to interpret that, use it to the best advantage, and then say to a customer, remote technology has told me that the nursing walls, let's just say, for these rodents are in the southwest corner of your warehouse. And now that we know that, we are going to focus on those nesting zones. That's going to be up to the technician to be trained, to use the technology, to interpret the technology, and act upon that technology. We will never replace technicians with remote technology.
Thank you very much, because I think so too. And you and I were both really, really passionate about pest management, and our peers all around the world that we share that passion with. And for me, always, I'm a strong believer that of your thesis, that your thesis is true, that digital is going to help us to do a better job and get more data to be able to act better in pest management, more sustainable. I always had the thesis that we get another intelligent tool, and it's just on us how we use it and interact with it and interpret it, as you said. And also, I think it could help, and I would like your comment on that as well, it could help on uplifting or elevating the role of a pest management technician, because we have, and I don't know if you have the same saying in the US, but in Europe we sometimes disgraceful call it bait box jockeys, or bait box checkers or whatnot, which is obviously a rather easy to do job. And my mission is really to give them better tools and to uplift or elevate the status of a pest manager, manager towards a consultant of the food industry or whatever clients you have, be it a shop, be it a bar, a restaurant, a hotel, a food or pharma company. Do you also think it could help to uplift the level and the perception of a pest management, PMP as you call it in the US, worldwide?
I think it's a critical question. And the reason I do, Danielle, is because we have a very high turnover. I don't know how it is in Europe, but here in the United States, we have a very high turnover of our pest management technicians. The better companies, of course, that have, good programs and have vision and inspire the technicians and pay them well, they have low turnover.
Yeah.
But part of that turnover problem is we hire really quality people that at first are very excited about the opportunity to work with animals and pest populations and biology.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we put them out on important accounts, very important accounts, like pharmaceutical accounts, food plant accounts, warehouses, hotels. And we say, your job is to service 300 bait stations this week. Well, having done that myself is, day after day, up and down with a key, opening up black boxes, 75% of which, if not greater, have never been visited. What did we just hire? That could be automated, quite frankly, if we wanted to. But that person saying, what am I doing? I'm checking black boxes one after the other, day in, day out, month after month, because this is a very important account for my boss.
Yes.
But in the end, I am nothing more than, as you just stated, an equipment checker, which anybody could do. You could go into that building and get the building custodian and say, let me show you how to do this. And you could do it now yourself. So your point is tremendous, because when I talk to technicians that I have somewhat coached or even sent them to the industry from university, they say to me, Bobby, after a year, I was completely bored. And that job was not a job for a biologist graduate. It was a job for anybody that could do it. So, and they quit. They're like, I'm bored with this.
And who cannot understand them? And I think in the current, in the 2020s, Generation Y and Z, generations that grew up without any hard times, basically, but with, I think, first world problems, they are looking for a purpose in their job. They're evaluating whether the company they work for offers them a purpose in the stuff they do. And I think giving them insightful, intelligent tools and a purpose to service these accounts within a sustainable means and IPM makes it more meaningful, if you ask me. What do you think? Yes, definitely meaningful is the key word there, because, everybody for the most part, wants to be a bit inspired by their work as well as rewarded for their work, right? You want to get up in the morning and look forward to some degree to what you're about to do that day. Otherwise, you may do it for a certain amount of period of time to bridge a gap for your pay or something, but you want something that is going to inspire you. That's how I see it, is like, oh boy, I may find an answer to what I've been thinking about this week on why the rodents behave the way they do. We have that completely within our power, within each company, to inspire the technicians that go out on a job. I use an expression by the famous E.O. Wilson, the famous naturalist, who says, to the lazy hunter, the woods are always empty. And we are hunters to some degree as to where are the pest populations? Why are they there? How are they getting in? And how can we fix it? Can we fix it? And if not, how do we intervene? There's a lot on the plate, from inspiring and making something meaningful, but it starts with every single company. And for every company's manager, I would ask, how do you inspire your technicians versus just giving them a route and telling them, get it done and don't have callbacks? Great argument, Bobby. Couldn't agree more, really. So I think that's definitely and really interesting task for the big organizations, but also the mid-size, the small mid-sized enterprises of the world, to give people a process and a meaningful approach in pest management, which in the end would reflect in a better pest management overall. So I think we're in exciting times. And speaking about exciting times, I would like your take on obviously the future, the next 5, 10, 20 years of pest management maybe. We talked a lot about digital sensors, and obviously there are various forms that are available in the markets even today. How do you see the technology developing within the next couple of years, and why did it not yet scale into pest management? Why is not yet every single digital box already with a small sensor, camera, or whatever already, when we have things like that, an iPhone or stuff that's incredibly intelligent and performant? So what is the barrier?
I often ask myself that question, is because I'm a person, when I see something make sense, I'm like, now, let's do it now. Let's go.
Crazy,
yeah. And I think, in the industry has been in a particular mode of operation for a couple 100 years. And when you have a model that not only is the industry in that mode, but the customer base expects that mode, and all of a sudden technology has caught up and is beginning to surpass the old mode, you're going to have this change. You're going to have this next wave. And especially with pest control, because I think so many people are a little bit, dubious as to what are you doing and does it work? Because, we've had people that say, I've had 3 pest control companies, and the first 2, I don't know what they did, but it didn't do anything. Mm-hmm. And so we have a little bit more of a disadvantage of customers asking us to embrace new technology. They don't understand pests well enough. You and I do, and perhaps many of sitting in on this meeting later will. However, I think we are waiting for a tipping point.
Yes.
If you're familiar with that concept. And right now, I even have a hard time getting some food plants, which they are all about food safety, and they're very good food plants, but they're still very cautious and hesitant to embrace the remote technology, as an example. Mm-hmm. And even though I'm urging them, trust me, this is the smartest thing we could do. Mm-hmm. They're worried about auditors. They're worried about government inspectors. They haven't used it enough to feel where they're comfortable. So it's going to take time, which is frustrating. But I think we are going to hit a tipping point.
Yes.
And I think there will be a revolution, in the pest management industry the same way, probably a little bit longer. But remember the revolution when we switched from spraying for cockroaches to baiting for cockroaches. Yes. That was a game changer. We went to baits for termites. Who would have thunk? Yeah. I think this is in the same realm, mm-hmm. but because it's not a treatment, mm-hmm. it's having its day in terms of a little bit of a lag. But I have every confidence, having worked with it so much, that it is going to go forth and be globally embraced.
I think so too, and I couldn't agree more, really, Bobby. One thing I was really, the definition of a tipping point for me is a comparison to popcorn. You remember when you do popcorn in the kitchen, it goes like pop,
yes.
pop, and then suddenly it goes pop, 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 and that's kind of the tipping point. And one of my last interviewees was Tony O'Donovan, who is head of Pest Control Global of Tesco, Tesco is one of the biggest supermarkets, I think, in Europe, and they probably also have some stores in Asia, and I don't know if in the US, but I think over 10,000 of stores, so quite a big shopkeeper, as he calls himself. And Tony said, and launched within our podcast or in our video interviews here, that they've just signed probably the biggest pest control, digital pest control contract in the world, which he was responsible for, and which he made to go in over 4,000 sites with probably over 35,000 digital devices in the UK starting now, which to me was it felt like a tipping point. And I said, Tony, wow, you really got to be proud of what you just achieved for Tesco there, because I think all the other supermarket chains, I mean, you name them, and you have even bigger ones in the US, Walmart, etc. Do you think that could be kind of a tipping point? Is that a certain number we needed to make things work quicker?
Yeah, I think the Tesco example is going to be, for sure, one of the forces that push this towards the tipping point. Mm-hmm. And, because of course, everybody looks to give me example. If I say to one of my clients, you need to install 65 sensors into this pharmaceutical plant, they're going to be hesitant unless I show them there's another pharmaceutical plant or something similar. It could be a supermarket chain like Tesco or Walmart or somebody. They want to see, is this dependable? Can I talk to someone? Has it stood the test of time for audits and government scrutiny? And so by having a Tesco start this to that magnitude, and willing to share that knowledge, perhaps at conventions, the pest, expos and so forth, that is going to push this in a significant way, because it is a very identifiable, established entity that everybody can relate to. Oh yeah, I know Tesco, of course. And if Tesco said it's really helped them, I'm on board. So, now where's the tipping point for me is, I would like to see it common speak. When I speak to someone, I could say, which remote technology are you using before you hire me as a consultant? And they would already have an answer saying, we've been using this for 2 years now. That for me is a tipping point.
I agree, yeah. And I think it's also a race of technologies. It's basically like back in the days, Samsung, Apple, Nokia, etc. I mean, the iPhone was launched, I think, 2006, and it took a while to be accepted by the broader world. I don't know, at least almost up to 10 years before everybody had a smartphone. So I think there's definitely an adaptation phase for smart digital sensors and pest control as well. And I agree with you that there is many forms that drive that acceptance. Clients that ask for a certain type of service that also play a vital role in influencing how we manage pests. But also, as you said, the government with laws and standards, like American Institute of Baking being one. I don't know, maybe you can comment or have an outlook or an assumption on how the US is going to react within the next 5 years. I know that in Europe there are discussions of maybe adapting the law towards application of rodenticides to demand more IPM per law before chemicals or physical control can be applied. And also, do you have some sort of idea where the standards are heading? Because I know that from the AIB especially, that digital trapping for the past 5 years was accepted broadly, and even the head of AIB Europe, Richard Britton, said that it's assigned, I think, digital sensors are assigned for AIB and are positive to be used in an audit. So are there any signs from your end that you have surveyed in the market from, let's say, law standards?
That's one of the areas that I think is lagging a little bit behind, although I think the laws and the FDA here in the US and the USDA and the whole supply chain, Daniel, I think they are receptive because they can read up on themselves and they see that it is a digital world. So there's receptivity to this. There's also now, if you've been watching, since you mentioned auditors, for example, I've been doing surveys and audits, consulting audits on food and pharma for a long time. And there's about 8 major auditing groups here in the US, and many of them same for Europe. And 7 of those 8 now use terminology where equipment and inspections of that equipment and using technology for that equipment is assessment based, instead of, they used to all put out guidelines as to how much equipment what would be the spacing for that equipment, and so forth. And none of which, all that spacing, let's just say every 10 meters, you're going to have a bait box around a warehouse, and you will check it once or twice a month. None of that was based on science, not a single bit of it. And I actually traced that back in graduate schools. Where did those rules come from? They did the best they could in the 40s, believe it or not, with estimating the home ranges of rodents and how they travel. And he said, well, let's just put a bait box in every home range of a rat, which is maybe 50 to 100 feet. Yeah. But we now know, in fact, I just finished working on a paper with Cornell. We've proven that rodents don't behave, for example, around buildings in linear fashion. They behave in clumped distribution fashion. It's the job of the pest professionals using technology, if you will, coming, and their knowledge to put equipment where it will intercept these pests. Yes. That is going to be a total game changer. I think that we will see that equipment may look crazy in the future. One side of a warehouse has 40 pieces of equipment, another side has 3. That's the way animals behave, and remote technology, for my pilots with it and working with it, has already begun to prove that is true. So that's where I think it's going, is sooner or later when we do hit this global tipping point in technology plus experience plus dedication and all those great factors, pest control is going to look radically different. The same way a termite job looks radically different against subterranean termites. It is radically different. It's not slightly different. That's where we're going.
Yeah. I would love to revisit that topic, especially on digital sensors every, I don't know, like 6-12 months from here on, because I also think the tipping point has been reached. Now it's a race of, in my honest opinion, the technology drivers of the world, people that make Internet of Things smart, whatever you want to call it, traps. But I want to close with something I always remembered you saying from a talk that you gave at MPMA some years back, where you said pest controllers need to be detectives and need to survey things like a detective and be curious. And I really love that, because in the end, if you ask me, let's say 10, 20 years from today, 2040 maybe, if I look back on my career, I think pest management itself did not change, and your quote there did not change at all. We are just using different tools, aren't we?
Yes, I would agree with that comment. You know, it's funny you mention that as we wrap up, because right now, this morning before I got online with you, I'm working on an article for pest control technology, and the title of that article is "We Are Observational Biologists." and the whole business of going back to that talk where I mentioned detective work is we are being paid to observe live animals, whether they are ants, birds, you name the pest group. If we are not biologists and we're careful about our observations, what are we? What's our definition? How would we like to get up every day and say, please define what you do? And I would say you're paying me to be an observational biologist. You don't have to have a degree in it, but you better have experience and you better be able to use everything that comes with that. So that, for me, that's where it's going.
Love it. Look forward to the article on PCT. Bobby, thank you so much for the interview. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. It was an honor to be asked to address talk management. Thank you.
You're welcome. And look forward to the next one, revisiting these topics with you in around 6 months or something.
Okay. Stay safe in Germany, okay?
You too.